You just body slammed me and broke my glasses.
Get the hell out of here.
Alright guys, welcome back to Large Lads number 18 with your returning host, who is now a 500-pound bencher, Max Sheether, and fellow, I guess also 500 and 600-pound bencher, temporary guest Sam Sheether.
Not a big deal. It was just a couple of 500-pound benchers.
Yo,
the boy got it done. Finally,
1,100-pound bench between the Sheether brothers now.
What was it? When did you bench 475?
2 years ago.
That was a grind of a 25 pounds, but we got it done,
I did
baby.
15 pounds this block, so most of it was done this block. We just tried hard. That's all there is to it.
Let's go.
It's all about effort, boys. Today's topic is going to be lifting mistakes that we have made.
And some of them that we haven't made that we threw in there, because when we were brainstorming this idea, it did cross our minds that our lifting mistakes might not be the most common average. So we threw in some other ones that just came to mind. But for the most part, we're just talking about what we fucked up. Yeah. Also, I'm going to show you guys my cool new grip shirt.
The new segment of Large Lads is show and tell.
Look at this. Very cool. It's shiny. It's a grip shirt for strongman for my log. In my upcoming contest, you need to have Cerberus brand because it's a sponsor.
Are they doing only one brand?
It's Cerberus or the Federation also makes them.
Okay.
But I can't wear my A7 ones, which are nice and grippy and fresh.
Kind of lame.
Well, it's got no brand on it, but I get it. You know what I mean? Like, they're sponsors.
I think they should give them to you.
Yeah, maybe a discount. I get it. So it's like, I got this. It's fresh. It's nice.
Yeah.
It's cool to have a new grip shirt anyway. It looks pretty slick.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's not today I get to break it in on the log. So we're loading up on water to make sure that I'm at least respectably strong on the log. Didn't quite get enough food down yesterday. I was getting pukey by the end of the day.
Whew. During the road to a 500-pound bench, I was starting to yarf a little bit more. It was really a problem.
We should be back rolling with the regular Large Lads next week. As Max mentioned, it's very predictable. When Max enters a peaking phase, Large Lads does not happen.
Yeah.
So this is the last week at the peak for the big fella. Big squat tomorrow.
Yep.
Deadlift, we'll see.
We're hopeful.
Little hamstring tweak last week.
Extremely hopeful, though.
Old coachy over here might pull the plug because it's been a sick block, and it would really sour the big bench and the big squat to then just tear your hamstring. So we'll see about that, but big increase to the total between the squat and the bench.
Yeah, I think it'll be about like 20, 25 pounds.
26.
Plus when I pull this deadlift.
Yeah.
30-something. Easy peasy.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah.
But that means Max will be done peaking next week, maybe even halfway through this week. Because if he finished up on Friday with the deadlift, he'd probably still be pretty toasted come next week's Monday Large Lads. But if we wrap up halfway through this week, Max will be fresh and spry and energetic again for you guys. I will not be, but I'm always here for Large Lads. Dragging ass through this peak. I'm still here. Because these are my last 2 heavy weeks of training here. So we're really in the thick of it. But I'm dedicated to the Large Lads.
Also, Sam's going to Viper the whole log series.
That's my goal.
If he does it, it's a failure, so...
That is, yes, it is if I don't Viper the log series. That's the goal I set for myself. If I don't Viper it, it's a failure.
Yeah. All right, first lifting mistake is one that I made over and over. Angst is the only motivation. Like, I'm very much so a pro-hype dude in terms of my own lifting, to some amount of productivity and some amount of not. But there was a really solid 2-3 year period where it was every day I would be like, I hate myself. And I would go to the basement and deadlift. And, it was cool. I feel like having such a negative view of lifting makes it inherently unsustainable.
We have met so many people that are like, dude, I train my ass off because I fucking hate myself. Powerlifting is a view of how pissed off I am at the world. And then they get a girlfriend and they quit lifting because they don't hate themselves anymore.
It's so brutal.
We've lost so many boys to falling off because the only reason they pushed themselves in the gym wasn't because of any mental fortitude. It was due to angst. And then things start going a little bit better in their life and they're nowhere to be found.
It is crazy. Like, it'll sometimes be like someone who's like, gets to like a 1,900 pound total. And then we'll get a girlfriend.
Off pure, yeah.
And I'm like, damn, that's crazy.
Yeah,
you made it very far.
Made it to
off.
2K. Well, just getting a girlfriend is enough to end your career.
Just anger about lack of girlfriend.
Wild. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's a big thing. It does make it kind of unsustainable. It does, like, there's a lot of overlap with then just doing like a dreamer bulk and getting obese. You're like, I don't give a fuck. I hate myself anyway.
Which puts off getting the girlfriend.
Yeah, which delays getting. Yeah, it just makes it so that like powerlifting is almost an inherently negative thing, and it's like I think that's something that you really managed to pivot on, which is you've gotten really good at getting your adrenaline and getting hyped up without just being a little piece of shit, little pig boy. Right? Where it's like, I think you've gotten good at just like getting blindly hyped about nothing. That's the real skill.
Just listen to a Doom audio and then
yeah, exactly. I am Doom guy. That's me. That's way better. That's a sick mindset. That's a real killer's mindset. Yeah. Being fucking delusional.
There's something about like that's way more like hardcore than in my mind of just like enjoying it rather than just being like I have to hate myself.
I have to hate myself to push myself hard, and it's like I've always thought about that for like the longest time. It's like, man, you need to be upset to push yourself. I think a real fucking Chad would push himself because he feels like it.
Yeah,
like just as far,
Yeah.
Like
or farther, yeah.
Further, it's just like, I think it's interesting, so I push myself. Like, that sounds way cooler. Mm-hmm. You know who's not just like, I hate my wife is so mean to me posting? JF. JF is just like, lift heavy, pussy.
And someone who made a whole video about this, just about like, what's really hardcore is what we do.
No, but I don't know. I think there is validity to that one. There's not much validity to most of the bullshit that we say on here. But like, I think there's a lot to be said for like, if you're actually mentally stout, you just push yourself because you want to get strong. That's reason enough. And you're disciplined enough to push yourself anyway,
I think there's some like amount of like, because I had like literally no sporting background before I came into it, so it's like my ability to be like uncomfortable and be okay with it was so limited that I think it had like some.
A lot of lifters go through that, right? So it's like, who knows, right? It's like, would they be where they're at if they didn't go through that? I think the real problem is when you don't eventually turn that corner and think about it a different way.
Yeah.
I mean, some guys just know how to push themselves. They who doesn't angst lift? Jasper. Jasper is just like her heavy deadlift's fun. That's a fucking great mindset. Jasper's like, I tore my hamstring. Haha, that's bad.
I've seen
time to go buy some peptides.
Jasper is a guy that Sam now coaches that I've known since I was like 16.
Jasper is a champion.
The coolest dude. Such a jolly dude. I've never seen someone. He like walked into the gym one day, showed me the bruise on his hamstring from tearing it, tried to pull more, like fucked up his other hamstring, and went like, "Oh, that was stupid of me,"
and then just waddles home.
Just did like upper back accessories and then left, and it was like. That was like it, and he came back in the next day just as happy. Like
Jasper has the mindset of a true like winner.
There's the old George Lehman audio of like if you could be just as happy peeling potatoes as deadlifting 800 pounds, you'd be peeling potatoes, not deadlifting 800 pounds.
Jasper's proof that's not
the
true.
Greatest exception. That man could be just as happy.
No,
playing.
Potatoes don't make Jasper as happy as lifting heavy and hurting himself over and over.
I don't know if that guy had to choose between old school RuneScape and
it might be over if you had to pick between the two.
If those are mutually exclusive,
we might lose Jasper and John Hack.
Truly, or by two of the greatest lifters of our generation. All right, not being able to change focus between phases.
Yeah,
that was one that I feel like most of these are things that I was guilty of.
What's that fear of like if I'm not maximally strong right now, I've lost it. I've regressed.
Yeah.
And it's going to be just as hard to get it back as it was to get it the first time. I think a lot of that comes down to just not having had enough training experience to be confident in the retraining effect. So it's like if we drop back to volume, we build this big base. If I asked you in the end of hypertrophy to hit a single, it's going to be shit.
Oh, like in the first single of the strength phase is awful.
Yeah, in that regard, you've regressed,
Yeah.
right? But you've done it enough times, and you're like, my first single back felt terrible, but then the next week feels better. And then if I give myself a 6-week lead up, and I did build a big enough base,
Yeah.
I'm good for a new max. In 6 weeks, I could always, it probably takes less than 6 to get back to peak condition, probably 4.
Yeah.
And having confidence in that,
Yeah.
to know that you don't constantly need to be testing to prove to yourself you're still strong. Not only prove you're still strong, being okay with that number sliding down a little bit.
Yeah.
Because like you've got this anytime, anywhere mentality. I should be able to do 405 anytime, anywhere. And it's like, well, if you want to get to 425, the most effective way to get there is to let that slide back, build up a bigger base of volume, and then push past. Whereas you progress slower if you really are married to this 405 anytime, anywhere, and you try to do like a concurrent approach.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like sometimes like dudes will kind of like really do themselves a disservice by like they'll peak up to like their new best set of 7, right? And they'll be like the whole focus of something, and then they'll like start on a program, and their programmed best set of 7 will be lower than what they did, and it'll be like, oh, I'm weaker now, instead of being like, oh, fatigue.
When you peaked, you basically peaked for that, right?
Yeah, for a set of 7, opposed to being like the goal of that is not solely just the highest possible set of 7. It's like the training effect of like gaining strength.
Yeah.
And like I feel like that's another mistake that.
Well, that's why RPE training being popular is good, right? Because the goal isn't the heaviest 5 you've ever done or it's useless.
Yeah.
It's a hard set of 5. That's what your body really identifies and is probably more relevant to what the stimulus is.
Yeah.
Is okay, well, what we generally like RPE. This is going to be not very entertaining for the people, but I think it's interesting, right? RPE is just a very clever way of describing what very good athletes were doing intuitively to try to teach people to get to that point faster, right? There were people that were training with submaximal sets billions of years ago. They didn't have numbers assigned to them. Almost the same way percentages almost just describe what very good athletes were doing anyway. It's what guys already understood, which is that what makes this session productive is hitting 3 relatively difficult sets of 5, but I leave 2 in the tank, is what they might have said. RPE is a good way to communicate that and get people practicing and moving towards these effective sessions and getting away from this, like, yes, it's a helpful model when you're first learning of like, you need to overload. You need to overload. If your 5x5 isn't heavier than your last 5x5, that's not training. So yes, it fucking is. If I do 5x5 and it's like very difficult, and then I do that same 5x5 again next week, it's not like that has 0 training stimulus now because I've done it once before, right? So it's like this idea of overload is what is necessary. You kind of outgrow that eventually, and like realize that we're looking at the sets more from a stimulus perspective, not just that everything needs to be a PR perspective, because you can't do that.
It's also like a whole block thing. Like there's something that you've always said that I think was like a really good thing to discover early on is like, am I better this week 7 rather than last week 7?
Yeah.
And that's where kind of the whole like needing multiple blocks.
And it accounts for fatigue.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of like comparing to a fresh all-time best.
Yeah.
You know, or like your first pick is strength. That single is going to feel like shit because it's your first foray back into heavy singles. Well, yeah, like you're going to panic if you compare that to your peaked single from last block.
Yeah.
Compare it to apples to apples. Your first single from the prior training session and the one before that, and just kind of get a gauge of those. Is it similar difficulty with 5 to 10 more pounds? If so, good, right? So it's like, I think RPE is like helpful-ish for kind of breaking out of that a little bit, because again, it's probably a very accurate descriptor of what good trainees were doing anyway. But also at the same time, I do like the angst thing. There's a learning period of just overload, just do more than last time. That gets you to learning just how far you can push yourself. Otherwise, you won't know what an RPE 10 is. So you could argue maybe you can't skip that step of, just do more. Do something you haven't done before. But eventually it needs to become a slightly more stimulus-oriented mindset of what is an effective training session, rather than like a numerical comparison. It has to be a PB.
Yeah. Something I feel like I see a lot is like, it'll be like really advanced level lifter talking about like their session today, right?
Yeah.
It'll be like, I'm working up to like 2 to 4 reps that are kind of hard. And people will be like, oh, like, dang, like, this guy really doesn't have a program at all. Like, this just goes to show you. And it's like, that's just like an insanely intuitive knowledge.
So that's what I was getting at, right?
Yeah.
It's like if you hear a lot of high-level athletes, like they have a structure, but that structure allows for a lot of training intuition because they have a 10, 15, 20-year training history. And that's why people will be like, what is the percentage, though? And they're like, I'm finding a heavy triple. So they're like, oh, so you don't have a program. No, I do have a program. I'm fine. Like, I understand how this all flows together, and I reliably peak at the meet. I have a program.
And if I ran that program, I'd go terribly. It's like, yeah, because you take the heaviest possible thing every time.
You don't have it's not about, like, you'd be like, okay, well, I need to hit a PR triple.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, this guy's like, well, what will prepare me for the next week? I have a general framework. Like, if you hear, like, Graham Hicks lead up to the 505, there's a framework with a lot of room for his training intuition as someone who's been a professional strongman for a decade.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, that's where RPE comes in, is like, he doesn't probably even have an RPE in his head.
Yeah.
He knows roughly how hard it should be at this point in his preparation.
Yeah.
But we can take some really good extrapolations and say, like, it looks like these good athletes are training at about 2 reps in reserve at this proximity to competition. So you should aim for, okay, like, instead of just saying find a triple, where that guy's going to find a PR triple, and it's going to be max effort, and there's going to be nowhere to go from there.
Yeah.
You're going to say find a triple at 8. So it's descriptors of what these guys were kind of intuitively doing, and then trying to take that in a little bit more of a learnable fashion to speed up that process a little bit.
It's kind of just understanding like what the point of this session is, because it's like
every session is to prepare you for the next one, not to be something that you get to not every session's about something you can post on Instagram and brag about. It's what do you need to do to be prepared for your next session. Yeah, and you should have a framework of like all of those sessions leading into the session that really matters or the meet.
I remember like as we get on with like seeing a video where it's like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna do 2 to 4 sets of 6 to 10 reps.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's just like nonsense.
2 to 4 sets. Yeah, it's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, and it's like they just know like the goal is to work hard enough and not be overly fatigued for the next week. Like check the box of good hard work.
Yeah, and I think very experienced athletes have a good feeling for like throwing a dart and landing that dart in the general area of, okay, on one side, it's enough work to get better. Yeah. And it's on the other side, it's not so much work that it's counterproductive, right? Because there's a certain amount of fatigue where we need to get above it to really get a robust adaptive response. Yeah. And then a little bit more, a little bit better response, a little bit more, a little bit more. But then it goes backwards, right? Where we're not getting any additional adaptation. Yeah. We're just digging a bigger hole to recover from. Yeah. And so a good athlete has a very good feel of like, yep, I was going to do 4 sets. I'm right in the sweet spot after 3. Yeah. I'm not just, and like, I remember thinking that when I was like, you're a bitch, do the 4th one. I would give it up on your session, pussy. I would never do that.
Yeah, I would do all 4 sessions. I want it more than you.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I would watch these videos and be like, yeah, I'm auto-regulating, I'm dropping the last set. I'm like, I would never do that. It's like, yeah, that's why that guy's better at lifting than you fucking doof. I remember thinking that. And I was like, looking back, that was definitely one of my more dumb mindsets, is thinking that like, I'm more hardcore than advanced lifters I was watching the videos of, because I wouldn't have auto-regulated. It's like, you're a dummy. Those guys are like, to get that far, for the most part, especially in strength sports, these are very hardworking people. You're probably not as above and beyond hardworking them as you think you are as an intermediate lifter.
Even the turbogenetic freaks, I feel like a lot of times if you really watch their training, are doing things better than you probably think.
It's kind of variable. Like, I think you could really, really point out, like, when he's working hard, Larry works very hard. Larry had a coach for a little bit there that had some of the most dumb fucking kitchen sink training I've ever seen. Like, the sessions were so stupid and so hard. Of course, he got stronger because he's Larry Wheels. Yeah. But it's like, holy fuck, those are hard sessions. I think the example of Larry Wheels, where people are like, they're not wrong saying, well, like, yeah, but Larry just fucks off and doesn't train for a few months. Yeah. And then pushes really hard for 10 weeks and then hits a new PR. Yeah. That doesn't work for most people.
Of course.
Most people need to keep, like, it maybe don't go pedal to the fucking floor like Larry does. Keep it halfway year round and you'll get much better results. So there are some exceptions of, like, there's definitely some athletes that I suspect are putting forward an effort in their off season that is pretty subpar. Yeah. And they can get away with just pushing the pedal to the floor and getting in shape for a big contest. Yeah. So it's like but like, when that pedal's to the floor, I promise you, they're working hard. You're like, well, I do more sets at 90%. His 90% is a lot heavier. The absolute load comes, like, it's like, I do way more work than Eric Lillybridge. I'm sure he feels like shit Lifting the weights we're at now, I'm like, oh man, this is a little bit more fatiguing than it used to be.
Believe it or not, I can't do the same amount of volume I did with a
exactly. So it's
squat.
like, I promise he's dealing with feeling like absolute trash through the whole meet
And it's
prep.
just more productive to like not do 8 sets at 90% like you. Coping about volume.
Oh yeah, if I had $1 for every client, it's like, hey, I don't respond to volume. I don't trust your ability to gauge what you respond to because you're the same guy that's always hitting singles.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you do a little volume paired with your single in the same week. You're not periodizing. And it's like, you're fatigued, so your single went down. You're like, oh man, I had a terrible response to volume. And it's like, that is the most Play-Doh brained understanding of this shit I've ever heard in my life.
It's also like distinguishing like what you like versus what works for you. Because if you're like, hey, I like heavy training.
Well, I think sometimes they are coming to the conclusion based on what they're looking at that they respond better because they're looking really, really short term. And they're like, if I do heavy this week, I feel really good to lift heavy next week.
Yeah.
If I do volume this week, I don't feel good to lift heavy. So it's like, it's a 1 week response time.
Yeah.
What makes my 1RM budge? Because a lot of the time they're not advanced enough to where they can see some training effect in 1 week.
Yeah, they're just spamming neural adaptations.
Yeah, so they're like, I saw some neural adaptations. I didn't bury myself. So next week I felt stronger. I respond to volume, and I didn't respond to volume. I responded to intensity.
Yeah.
And it's like, you need to zoom out a little bit more, get comfortable with that coming back. And it's like a lot of that, I think, just comes from usually it's guys who are just getting to the end of being able to get away with not periodizing their training.
Yeah.
And so they're like, and then they're running into a wall, which is usually why they hired me. But then they tell me I don't do volume.
Yeah.
And it's like, my brother, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Is you can't be trying to be ready for your new single every single week.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a common one.
I also think, like, I don't know, I've gotten so many messages from dudes being like, hey, like, I hired this new coach, and he's just not accepting the fact that, like, I don't respond to X. And it's like, I feel like you might just be wrong. You gotta have a little bit more faith
when you
in
need
the
to
system.
buy in and you need to be doing it correctly, because it's like, if I do garbage volume, like with terrible technique, I might not get the robust training effect I'm looking for from it.
Yeah.
But that's not the problem of me not responding to volume. It's that I'm not bought into this system and do it. My job is to execute what the coach told me really well, like an expert, to do justice to what they wrote. You're coming in without buy-in. Yeah. I get those too. And it's like, dude, first of all, if you're messaging another coach express your concerns to your coach. Communicate. I don't want to talk to you. Like, I'm not going to, I sort of got people message me, like, trying to get me to client snipe them. I'm like, that's not going to happen.
Yeah, isn't my current coach doing such a shit job?
Dude, I get those. They're like, does it sound like my current coach's program sucks? And it's like, you're a little snake boy.
I don't want you as a client.
I don't. Like, you're going to do this
you
to me.
You have one bad block and you're going to run to...
Yeah, you're going to have a bad block. Because everybody has bad blocks. No, like, it's like, there's so much that could go wrong. Yeah. You're never going to nail it every block. Maybe I fumble as the coach. Yeah. Maybe you fumble as the athlete. More often than not, both. Yeah. We need to rework it and then come into next block with some altered plans. Yeah. Your head, like if your head isn't in the right space, you're not going to be executing, you're not going to be eating your food, and it's like a great program might be wasted. Yeah. And then you're going to be a little snake boy, like you're going to me.
See, their training actually is trash.
They do too much volume.
Only spamming accessories you're good at. That's one that I was, because you find one thing that works and you're like, that's the thing that works, and then I would only do that, and then Sam would like, how about we try this other?
Max hates when I have new ideas.
Yeah. This is something I would say I still kind of am a little bit, still make that mistake. Is that I would be like, this is the accessory that works for me. So I'll spam that into the ground and then like try to like...
When it's like, that's where novelty, you're not getting to take advantage of novelty. Yeah. And it's like accessories is where you get to. Mm-hmm. The guys that are constantly trying to abuse novelty in their primary lifts. Yeah. I find that yields a better or worse result. I think Bromley kind of disagrees with me, and that's fine. Bromley knows what he's doing. So Bromley will like implement more novelty as a driver of stimulus in like tier 1 exercises or tier 2 exercises. Whereas, I'll usually rely on novelty to drive adaptation in more of those like tertiary, more muscle building spots, where it's like if we understand why exercise 1 is working, we could probably come up with exercise 2, 3, and 4 that would also check that same box, and then we could rotate between them. So that way we're never trying to be great at walking lunges. They're a means to an end. Yeah,
Or like switching from a stiff leg to an RDL. As long as like I'm getting a stretch on both, it's like it doesn't really matter. Or like a dumbbell bench to a camber bar bench.
Yes,
it's like the effect is just moving my.
It's understanding what it is, right? It's a pure hinge. It's an extended range of motion horizontal press. With a big stretch on the pecs. Also, the pec deck gets to prime on Wednesday.
Let's go.
I'm assuming it'll take them a day or two to assemble it.
Straight to 5:45, boys.
But you should for your Saturday session. You should be able to get a nice little pump going.
Sick. Quantitative only training.
This is one I fucked up bad because I understood it was probably a necessary learning phase to just like do more than last time. Do something you've never done before. If you fail 5RM, drop the weight back, hit a new 12 rep.
Yeah.
Got me great results. But you need to think of yourself as a bit more of an athlete, right? And it's not just like, oh, I threw 10,000 jabs today. Well, what did they look like? I'd rather you throw 100 that look good. There's qualitative parts of training that really matter to the outcome. And I've had so many clients that have a very hard time it's probably on my end as a recluse autist to not be able to communicate this well. But it's like, dude, it's not like there's a very distinct quality of movement that will make 50 pounds less on this RDL have a more potent effect on your deadlift. And they just cannot get past, but it's more weight for more reps. So that's what makes you stronger. More weight, more reps. And it's like there's a third variable there. And it's like every other sport we know this matters. It's not like, this isn't like a kung fu movie where to get good at jabs, you throw 10,000 jabs. No, you have to throw them right. And you have to drill them in certain positions that would actually be relevant to sparring. It's the same reason that for the most part, you shadow box and you move in variable ways. And it's not just stand, jab, jab, jab. It's not that's not how it works, right? Because it's not purely numerical. We understand that in every other sport. It's like you had to understand that distinctly when you threw shot put. It's not just about throw the shot put hard for 5 sets of 1. It's like most of the results past your newbie phase come from throwing the shot put better. Most of the results past your newbie phase come from bench pressing better, not doing more.
Well, I feel like
I fucked this up so bad too. All my assistants work, I was like, but if I just do more weight, and it's like, what are you doing it for? There's a form you could get more work, for, a bigger stretch in your chest. More power off your chest could be developed that way. Oh my fucking God. This is one of the biggest mistakes I made in my training was taking this numbers only, log booking got me such good results for the first 3 years that I just could not amend that to include more auto-regulation to account for quality. And it led to my squat being bad because I would always do reps with a little bit more breakdown than what I should have. Now, what amount should be there, that's a different discussion that I don't care to do. But it's that was why my squat pull was stuck at 500 for a while. Because I was always just trying to overload. I was just trying to do sets I've never done before. And it's no, do a couple of sets that you've done before and do them better than you've ever done them with a technique that will help carry you past that 500. I just could not get that through my fucking head. And I would inflate my numbers by touching going my bench. And it took me so long to understand. You need to think of it as a sport. Even if you're powerlifting isn't a sport. Well, first of all, that's the dumbest argument ever. Ping pong is technically a sport. If ping pong's a sport, powerlifting's a sport. Suck my dick. That's this is it's such a weird, you're not a real athlete. Sure, I don't care, but by the definition of a sport, it's definitely a sport. And even if it's not, you'd benefit from thinking of it as a sport and learning from how athletes prepare for sports, right? This isn't angst garage, pain hour. We're training for a specific outcome. And if we're training for a specific physical outcome, there's certain ways to do that better and worse. And we should be investigating how to do those and taking our recovery serious. It's a lot of progress in powerlifting came from this not being a niche badass West Side guy who also does crack to trying to be an athlete. I can walk 100 feet without my back cramping because I'm kind of an athlete.
I feel that was something that I don't know. I feel I could have said it to you out loud, but it wasn't internalized for me until I did shot put. Was that
that was a huge pivot. That made you so much better at powerlifting to understand. Just to do another sport, because you've done other sports, but not as seriously.
Badly.
Exactly. You just showed up, and it's fun. But you weren't it wasn't on you to get better. And it's it was on you to get better at shot, because we didn't have much coaching. You did reach out and get coaching, but it was on you to get better.
Yeah.
So you needed to investigate, well, how do I get better? And it's like you learn things about how to prepare. Like, and there's a lot of similarity there. You know what I mean? And then you take those and you extrapolate those. Okay, well, this is how I understand sports now. Powerlifting falls into that same category.
Yeah.
And you got so much better, not because he's way more coordinated now. Like, I suspect you did. Yeah, a little bit more coordinated, a little bit more powerful, and that's awesome. But I think mostly it was that mental shift of like, to get the rock to go further, my technique. I don't just get really emotional
and try harder every single session. Yeah,
exactly. And it's like, why would that work in powerlifting if it didn't work in shot put? You know, like they're kind of similar endeavors.
Yeah, we're like X dude takes 20 throws, Y dude takes 20 throws, and one of them comes out with a better output, right? I feel like, especially in the lifting community, the immediate jump is like, one guy is just more gifted, right? When in how people were taking throws,
what were they doing between the throws? Yeah. Like you see guys just like you could always see it at meets too. Like the guy between that's just zoned out versus the guy that's like he's just doing weird motions in the air because he knows when he fucked up and he's like my release was fucking wrong.
Yeah, well, like actively thinking about just taking a video and being like, what did I do wrong on that one? Versus just like, all right, I threw, I'm gonna sit down. I threw, and
that would be like the shot putting equivalent of how a lot of people approach powerlifting. Is like, I'm supposed to do 20 throws today.
Yeah,
and it's like there's not really a whole lot of feedback between the throws about what could be done better.
Yeah,
it's like no one good would do that. And it's like you should take that same mentality of, okay, well, I've got 5 sets of squats.
Yeah.
Between them, what can I do better each time? And that will amplify your result. Now, some guys only, some guys are like form maxing.
Yeah.
And they never train hard.
Yeah.
They never bust their ass on bodybuilding work.
Yeah.
They don't eat protein. Like, there's definitely like a swing in the other direction of the pendulum. Like, this has been a thing. Like, in like extreme USAPL boy culture is everything is solved through technique.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes you just got to get burly.
Yeah.
It's the same thing as like there might be a guy who has wonderful technique in the shot.
Yeah.
He's just not burly. He's not powerful. And it's like, you need to eat more protein, eat more calories, and take your S&C work more serious.
Yeah.
You know, get your squat up, get your power clean up. And your shot will go up and up and up because your form is already great.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with like some of those guys who have amazing technique. It's like, wow, your bench is dialed. If you weren't a twig, you bench a ton.
Yeah.
You'll get 1-to-1 returns on your muscularity.
Yeah.
Whereas like you and I went too far the other way where we saw, improve physicality.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, our numbers went up, but we could, at any given time, we could have been doing more if we were able to display that physicality better by having that more technical mindset. And so you'd fix that only when you started like shot putting. You know what I mean? And it's like Chad Wesley Smith said this, he did the same mistake in shot put of like overemphasizing physicality and underemphasizing technique, and that really like shaped his view of powerlifting.
Yeah.
Because he was like, always like, if I can jump higher, I can clean more, I can squat more. Early, you get these amazing returns, so you get this feedback loop, and it's like you need to have the more holistic view eventually to get better.
Yeah, especially because it's like if you're on a high school meet and you're the guy who has all of the best physical attributes, you're probably gonna
crushing. Yeah, dude, if you're
at an Olympic trials, right, and your form is the worst, you're gonna lose.
Everybody's already like you. You know what I mean? Like everybody's strong.
Yeah. So
exactly.
It comes down to like who has the most like better minute technique.
Well, look at powerlifting, right? Like there were guys just as jacked that had very poor technical models for their sumo. But they were just as jacked. Everybody, go to these high level meets. Everybody's going to be pretty diesel.
Yeah.
A lot of it is going to come down to technique because they're at like everybody's already figured out that getting jacked is helpful.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
We covered the next one, which is only passively think about technique. So you got that one out of the park. Lying to yourself about ROM.
This is just your tricep press downs. Is this what this is?
Yeah, tricep press downs, depth on your accessories, your leg extensions, like, I don't know.
No, nobody does their leg extensions all the way. Set up that machine so you can get like a bigger stretch.
And it's crazy, because like we've had people that we've trained with that like you could show them a video of them doing it, and then show them a video of someone doing full ROM, and go like, these two videos are indistinguishable. And it's like, you just gotta stop lying to yourself.
Yeah, I think it's just they've gradually over time like coped their way into like my leverages.
Yeah, my joints make it so I can't like
that's for me that is the same. And it's like it's not. And you could work towards it. And like we've generally had a bias of when we're doing like true assistance work, like single joint stuff, always favoring towards more range of motion.
Yeah.
Right? Because we suspect more range of motion, especially in the stretch position, is more hypertrophic. That's the main thing we're looking for, is not like positional strength. We're looking for general hypertrophy. And then next week we can develop that positional strength with actual squats and benches and deadlifts and overheads.
Yeah. I remember,
So and so like I think sometimes there's some athletes that actually look for like positional strength from start to finish of their workout. So they're trying to make their tricep press down specific to where they're missing in the bench. Josh Bryant does this a little bit, where he's like looking for some strength carryover and some positional specificity of the assistance work. We don't really look for that. We just look for what is effective for developing these general muscles, and then our specific training and its close variations will take those bigger muscles and make them good at the specific task.
Yeah.
So we've always felt like if you can do a bigger range of motion on the leg extension, I don't care if it's less weight. I'm not trying to be the strongest leg extensioner. And I think early in someone's training career, just this idea of a big, strong guy has the most impressive on every motion he does.
Yeah.
A big, strong bencher would be doing the heaviest dumbbell bench in his whole gym. He'd be doing the heaviest triceps. It's like, for the most part, that's kind of true.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a guy who's a bit weaker than him who does more on the assistance work.
Yeah.
That's kind of lost the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
So it's like, I kind of get it. And I did gain a bunch of motivation early in my training from trying to be that guy that's using the most weight on leg extension. I'm the guy that uses the most weight on everything.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was motivation to push my assistance work. But eventually you realize it's kind of a means to an end. And if you can, it's tricky, because it's like some people just hear the get more out of less weight that really don't need to be getting more out of less weight.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you need to be getting more out of more weight. You need to get stronger. And it's
Yeah.
like I think some of the people that are most emotionally drawn to that phrase should not be hearing it. And they should just be listening to like Eric Bugenhagen be like, throw big weights
It's a
around,
mindset.
go harder. Yeah, so it's like, it's tricky, but you can't worry about that too much, because any good message there's gonna be someone who shouldn't hear it.
Yeah.
Or like reverse. The people that like hearing or Eric Bugenhagen be like, yeah, form doesn't matter that much, just fucking throw that shit around, baby.
Yeah, are the exact people.
Exactly. The guys that need to hear that the least are the guys that are gonna like that the most. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
And it's like, sometimes it's good though. Someone who's like really overly form oriented like Kirsten, sometimes being like, your form can deviate a little bit. Let's just try to do some stuff we haven't done before.
Yeah.
Eric's been a great influence on Kirsten.
And then two things that I lied to myself with my tricep extensions.
Let's go.
That I think might if you find some application to yourself. One, I was like, the mind muscle connection is just so good when I'm like kind of stopping partway through. The objective of how far you're moving the joint is probably more important. You're going to learn how to do a good job of getting a mind muscle connection if you're doing a greater range of motion. You just have to learn how to do that. Just being like, I'm getting this fucking crazy contraction.
I don't know if anyone else is doing that, dude.
No, I see people lying, doing terrible tricep extensions. I see it all the time.
None of my viewers.
That's
My
fair.
viewers would never.
Yeah, that's absolutely down. And then the other one was like, I see X great bodybuilder does this range of motion, and part of that is just like their arm is.
That is
so
also very
fucking
true.
big.
Yeah, it's like some of them are where they are despite what they're doing. Like,
Yep.
That there's more of those in bodybuilding than I expected looking around. Of like, okay, yeah, if you do crank your gear up to 3 total grams a week and you just get into a surplus, however, and you do it, you've got the genetics. Yeah, you're not going to beat the guy who's doing things right and doing all this, like just as genetically good as you and doing all the same things, but you'll be bigger than everybody else.
Yeah.
You'll be really big.
Yeah.
And so it's like, okay, there are way more exceptions than I thought. Because like in powerlifting, there's like, for the most part, I think most high performers could be learned from. That's less true in bodybuilding, it seems. But yeah, there's also that, like some of them, like I can't really go past about here, right? And I don't have big biceps. I don't really train them. And it's like, some of you guys who are large lads in training could probably get a much more, acute elbow angle. And that would be really, really good. Like you would get great training effect from that. And like when I do my tricep press downs, I kind of push my elbows back and out, and then I slide up, and then I go like that. But I'm trying to get the most closed elbow angle I can.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all are. At least we all should be.
Yeah.
Especially with research coming out about the length and position is good.
Yeah.
Right. That if you're gonna skimp anywhere, skimp at the lockout. Don't skimp at the stretch position.
Yeah, I that was always something that I'd be like, X person doesn't go that deep.
Although I would say that if we're training for a bench press, we should not be skimping at the lockout either.
Yeah.
Because I think I've seen a lot of athletes that have skimped on their lockouts in all of their pressing in the past. And they aren't very diligent about locking their elbows at the bottom of their tricep training either. And they're very positionally weak at locking their elbows because they've just done so much pump out volume that their chest and their shoulders develop and develop and develop. And they genuinely do get a meaningful weakness of elbow extension.
Yeah.
We know a guy like that.
Unique form over generic good form.
Yeah, we talked about this one the other time. I won't beat this one to death too much. Just, you hear about it in like weightlifting. People be like, don't just copy elite lifters that you think are the coolest.
Yeah.
Try to have generic form, and then eventually you'll know enough to make an informed decision on where you deviate away. If you're new, you probably don't know enough to know what should be unique about your technique to you.
Yeah.
It's going to be you're just going to be biased towards lifters you think are badass.
Or have really good leverages, so it's just gonna be a fundamentally a position.
You're just gonna be super upset that yours doesn't look like theirs or something as well. So it's I'll probably cap it there.
Yeah.
You can kind of take that pretty open ended. There are things you can learn. I think some people overstate how unique their training needs to be early in their training career due to their limb lengths. You're not having this massive issue with fatigue management yet. Your training was going to look pretty similar for quite a while to someone with a different build than you. And I say that as someone with the shorter limbs, longer torso build. My deadlift training looked pretty similar in volume and approach for quite a while. It wasn't until later that I knew enough to start tailoring that. I think guys are just they look at themselves, they're like, oh, I have long femurs.
Yeah.
I need to start accounting for that now.
Yeah.
But they haven't gotten any feedback in their training saying that they have to yet. And sometimes you can make some exercise selections to help try to stave off maybe the weak quad that can come with being a longer femored lifter or the weak posterior chain that comes with being a longer torso lifter. But I love that there's this narrative online that being a longer femored lifter is like a curse. You see people in the comments talk about it. It's like, dude, that's the better build for deadlifting, which is the biggest part of most non-super heavyweights totals.
Yeah.
Look at a lot of the record holders, and they are a little bit more but people talk about it in the comments like they've been cursed by God, and they will never.
It's so funny because I feel like a lot of the problems are more so from being really skinny.
True.
Whereas my squat just looks so gangly, and it's but your femurs could be a lot shorter and still look a little bit gangly because it's you're not.
Well, and you're comparing yourself to the extreme prettiest upright squatters.
Yeah, a guy who has fucking 80-inch legs and no femurs.
I do see that where guys are like, yeah, I've got really long femurs. It's like, I think you have very average proportions. You're just comparing yourself to Chinese weightlifters.
Yeah, you're
because their squat isn't stock upright.
Yeah,
they're like, no, I've got long femurs. It's like, well, no, you've got very suspect ankle and especially hip mobility.
Yeah,
they don't open at their hips at all. There's no external rotation going on in the bottom of their squat. So it's like, if you improved your mobility, you would stay a little bit more upright. And I think you would realize that you fall, most people, it's a bell curve, fall somewhere towards the middle, right? But it's like that. I think that there's people do think they need to customize early, and that's another one. Or they're like, oh, I'm a long femur lifter. I need to lift with this technique. Again, lift with generic technique. You won't have tremendous fatigue issues. As you become more and more experienced as a smart guy who's trying to get better at training, you will get feedback of, oh, I can't handle this anymore. But you should probably get to the point where you wrote it out first. Instead of trying to make that change preliminarily.
Yeah, something that we talked about that I thought was really interesting was that there are generally pillars of good technique, but they're going to look fundamentally different on different people. But that doesn't mean they're doing these drastically different things.
Yeah, they're following a similar technical model. It just looks different with their body. But yeah, they're trying to follow a similar approach.
Easy.
And also, what I was going to say, there is something to be learned from again, I would aim for generic at first. But there is something to be learned from okay, well, who's succeeding on the bench who's built like me? Let's say you're a large lads viewer and you're built like Kaylor Woolham.
Yeah.
Maybe watch Kaylor Woolham.
Hey, that's a 500-pound metric.
There might be something you can pick up there, right? Or it's like, oh, who's got short arms and exceeding in the deadlift? Are they using any strategies consistently?
Yeah.
There are great squatters with long femurs. It's not a death sentence. I've coached quite a few guys who their squat looks a little bit different. They're more forward leaned, but there are world record holders with femurs that are relatively long, and they adopt some different there's usually a little bit wider stance. They do develop their hips a little bit more. Maybe they need to work on their adductor development because they are going to take that wider stance. Maybe their toes are turned out slightly with that wider stance. There's going to be big demands on the adductors, so it's going to be okay, well, you might have a propensity towards an adductor tweak with this, so we need to make sure with our assistance work, we're really bulletproof in those adductors. Get on that adductor machine. at least once a week and bust ass and try to get stronger. And so it's like, yeah, there's things you can learn, but you don't need to embrace those right off the get-go.
But even before you've had any training sign to indicate that.
Exactly,
it's just
exactly.
An easy, quick one. Being uncomfortable unracking the bench.
You gotta be uncomfortable before you unrack the bench in some capacity.
That was a real big one. Is that
the
I just
type
feel like,
of uncomfortable is like, yeah. We see guys like right before they unrack it, they're like, okay, let's go. And like their foot's twitching, and it's like, no, you don't know how to do this.
Yeah,
you gotta get uncomfortably tight. How you get uncomfortably tight definitely has shifted over the years. Like the meta, like it used to be universal that you jam your knees out. Now a lot of guys squeeze the bench with their adductors. I really like that technique. I wish that was something that was around when we first started, because I like that technical model. I really don't mind it.
Yeah.
Right? Because the idea is we're putting our hip into extension, and we're kind of extending with the quads. Again, we're trying to slide towards where our spotter is.
Yeah.
So there's tightness there. We started to be a little uncomfortable from like maximally trying to slide towards our spotter and using that weight to pin our traps up and then drive up onto the traps.
I just got flashbacks to the boxing episode when he went like, I was like, oh fuck, I get my ass kicked again.
And so, you know, our hip is an extension. Maybe we adduct, maybe we abduct for extra stability. Maybe we just kind of hold neutral.
Yeah.
Some guys really pull into an arch. Some people will use their legs to push into their arch.
Yeah.
There's kind of a debate there, right? Some people flex their glutes. Some people relax their glutes. But again, we're creating a tremendous amount of stability because our body will throttle force output when it perceives instability. So if we create an environment of insane stability, we're going to be able to maximally output force in our upper body.
Yeah.
You know, we all kind of agree scaps down is very important. Some people will vary how much scaps back matters, but some people take a shallow breath of air. I'm a big believer in taking a maximum breath of air before you unrack for like a heavy single. So there's all of these things you're doing that might vary from person to person a little bit, but the net result should not be that you're wildly comfortable and have like a super relaxed face. So if you're unracking your bench and you're really, really relaxed, you got to work on that.
Also, just occasionally just try harder to get tighter, even if you're like, I'm getting as tight as humanly possible.
Oh, if I had a dollar for everybody who's like, yeah, no, I'm getting as tight as I can. It's like,
I do that all the time where I'll be like, Sam will be like, you need to get tighter. And I'm like, I think I'm getting as tight as possible. And then I'll try, and I'm like, oh, I'm getting way tighter.
The one that you're guilty of, and also everybody I do like a little in-person work is just like, I'm like, please breathe in more air. And they're like, no, that's as much air.
That's the most amount of air possible to take in.
Never is.
My lungs were about to explode. Changing things too often.
Yeah, that's
Sam's current sin, and
I think that's probably a lot of your guys' as well. If people you like kind of pseudo informational lifting content on the internet, you probably have a lot of people you listen to. Hopefully, I'm one of them. Bunch of other guys that are reputable are one of them. And the problem is that they're all reputable.
Yeah.
So you have a bunch of good ideas. And like I've said it a million times. And I feel like a dummy saying it again. But it's like you rotate between 100 things that all individually would have worked if you stuck to them.
Yeah.
Now none of them work.
Yeah.
So you've got no results from having access to 100 good methods. Just stick with one of them, commit to it, buy in, and then your job now shifts from deciding what to do to executing that as much of a pro as you can. But people don't make that transition. They stay in that. Well, what should I be doing? And then they shift. And what should I be doing? And they're second guessing it. And they're never putting, because of that, you got limited mental resources. So you're not putting that limited mental resources into executing as best you can and finding little things you could do better within the routine. You're questioning whether that should be in the routine at all.
I think that was one of the things, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things that like you liked about strongman, but also I think it's recently caused problems, is that like there's a bunch of different aspects to get better at, and you will sometimes like goalpost, like be like, oh, well, I need to get better at this, and like you'll stop and change like road to X, and then it'll do something else, and like you'll kind of change what your primary goals are.
I mean, I was already doing that because I was just training to train. Like I didn't really think of myself as a power lifter.
Yeah.
So I was already just training to train. Yeah. You know, like I think that strongman lends itself to that more than powerlifting. Yeah. Right? Like shot put. It's either going further or it isn't. Your total is either going up or it isn't. You can definitely get stuck in an intermediate forever strongman trap. Yeah. Because every show is different. Ah, damn, it's a shame that one had different events. Yeah. And it's like, yes, you should be monitoring your results in core frequent events, but you can play this game of, oh, I'm getting better though. Right now I'm working on my silver dollar deadlift. Why are you working on your silver dollar deadlift in the off season? Just because it lets you lift the most weight, and you're like, well, it's going up. And so, yeah, you've never worked on it before. And you can do this like conjugate goalpost move. If I can't PR my pull from the floor, I've got 100 other pulls I can do. So it lends itself to that, and like that's why I think having like kind of year-round background performance markers.
I was gonna say
is something that I was bought into coming in.
Yeah.
And I already, because I'm terrified of that, because I know I've already fucked that up, and it's probably the most distinct reason why my squat is behind my deadlift and my bench press. It's because for the first 11 years of my training, the bench press was just a fixture. The deadlift was just a fixture. At one point, I switched from sumo to conventional, but it was a fixture. What type of squat I would do would rotate.
Yeah.
And there's a reason that the lift I rotated the most is the most underdeveloped, and I think that's the order of it. I don't think it's the other order. I don't think I rotated it the most because it was behind. I think it's behind because I rotated it the most. You know, I don't think that's a coincidence.
That's fair. Yeah, I think.
But yeah, it's the boon of YouTube fitness and hearing so many cool different approaches that people have. Is you're just like, if you're a curious person about training like I am, you really want to try them.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds fun. That's such an interesting, different way of thinking about this. It's like sometimes you just need to admire those things from afar and stay stuck into your method. You know, it's like it's not lost on me that some of the most informed people I know about lifting are getting very poor results because of this same phenomenon and are getting outperformed by someone I truly believe is in the same shoes as them, that just got given a routine by someone else that did the research. Like,
Man, I'm that.
like 5 years ago, and they've just been doing, they're like, yeah, this is my routine.
Yeah.
And it's not like this thing, like, I'm in this part of my message. They're like, I've got a routine that I was given by my friend who did research.
Yeah.
And it's like, they've just been busting ass at doing their routine.
Yeah.
And it's like, could they be even better if that routine was like being periodized a little bit more and yada, yada, yada? Yes, they could be even better. But they're outperforming the guy that's being a neurotic fuck and changing things all the time.
Yeah. Minimalizing time at deadlift start position.
I just noticed this with newer lifters is everybody's terrified to spend, I don't want to spend time down there. And it's like, yeah, because you're weak down there. That's a problem. You should be like, you're not a fat guy. You don't need to do a rolling dynamic start like me, because I need to get, like, I'm too skinny to need a dynamic start, but it's the only way I can get in enough air to hold my torso positioning. It's kind of just what I've come to. But I recommended against it for people my size with short arms. Like, you're not big enough to need a dynamic start. You should be comfortable hanging out down there. You should be like, it's the same reason a lot of athletes can't pull slack. You're terrified and weak down there. You're going to try to just yank it out of there, right? The reason a lot of guys yank is because they don't have confidence in their ability to break it off the floor with good mechanics. So like, people will be like, I need to do a top-down setup. Again, it's cool that John Hack does it, and it works for some very high-level athletes. You should probably not be so scared of being in your start position. You should honestly be trying to get familiar down there. You do lots of air deadlifts, just like standing in the living room, like practicing, setting up. You're not uncomfortable in your start position, and you're 325 pounds, you know? And it's like, that should be something we aspire to with like low pause deadlifts. Spend time down there. Do a technique day. It's like, how on earth do we expect to pull the slack and break the ground with good mechanics if we're terrified of spending any time there? And we've customized our technique to spend as little time there as physically possible. We're not going to we don't have much opportunity to get better, I guess is what I'm saying. So doing like reps where you hang out down there, doing full resets, doing low pauses to get your familiarity with the bottom position higher would get a lot of people better at deadlifting.
It's so funny. I thought you were going the exact opposite direction with this.
Okay.
I thought you were going like people that like will go down there and like spend a while like hanging out basically. And
I think that's like new lifters. Sometimes. Actually, that's not fair. I know a lot of hook grip guys get too comfortable just hanging out down there in their head.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, speed up. And like, I know Josh always tells people like, speed up. And it's like, sometimes I do think people get stuck in their head down there. But I think a lot of guys who are, I think a lot of guys who are invested in increasing their deadlift realize they're in their head. Yeah. So their solution is just don't give myself that opportunity. Go.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think like, so it's like, yeah, I think it's common for, let's just say 400-pound deadlifters to hang out down there and overthink things.
Yeah.
But the guys that made it to 500, this was their solution. And it's like, it's not a bad solution. It works. But I think you could have a better understanding of the mechanics off the floor if you weren't so scared of that bottom position.
Yeah, that's fair. Because it's really funny. I was about to say, like, yeah, when I remember when I was like a 430 deadlifter, I would like get down to the pull, and I kept trying to like figure out where like how to pull, like how to tension stuff, and sometimes I think it would have just benefited me to just go. Yeah, to just go and like.
I don't know if that's always bad advice. I don't think just go or like grip it, baby. Yeah. It's always bad advice. You know, it's like Josh is very good at getting guys who are they've been in the gym and they've been deadlifting, but they're stuck at 300.
Yeah,
because they haven't been taken very seriously. Josh is very good at getting them like to 400 relatively quickly. You know, it's like that's a lot of his clients during the day is just in-person guys who like, yeah, I finished up playing high school football. I've been deadlift every now and then, but I'm stuck at 3 plates.
Yeah.
It's just like, get out of your head.
Yeah.
Here's how we can deadlift relatively safely.
Yeah.
Here's how you brace.
Yeah.
Don't overthink it. Just go. You know, as long as our brace is good and we've got a hinge, we're probably in a good spot. It's a great. He's great at it. He gets people there very quickly. I think eventually you do need to
From
really,
there, yeah, you need to.
Exactly. It's like anything else, right? It's like sometimes also the fastest way is not the best way. Like a perfect example would be the starting strength squat.
Yeah.
The starting strength squat is probably the quickest way to teach a very immobile gen pop person to do a squat around to depth. They're very good at getting people to do fundamental lifts very quickly. That's kind of what they specialized into. There's a reason that most high performers don't squat that way. So the problem there is like, okay, well, it's a quick way to learn it, but if it's a serious lifter, then they're going to have to unlearn it.
Yeah.
Maybe fine for gen pop people, but for aspiring competitive lifters, it would have been better to do it a little harder, but better at the start.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends.
And then I feel like we've had a really solid theme for this episode. 'Cause we've touched on most of the things. Not thinking of yourself as an athlete, not trying to get more athletic.
Yeah. I think that like there's a certain like connotation of like people, powerlifters aren't athletes. Sure, fine. Jesus Christ, this is the dumbest debate that people have on Instagram. It's like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You should still think of yourself as one. Because I think there's connotations of recovery that come with I am an athlete, and it's like people. There's some people that just grew up. They're like, I think of myself as an athlete. I like feeling like an athlete. It makes me take myself seriously.
Yeah.
I go to bed early because I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
And that's why they don't feel too sour grapes about like, oh yeah, I don't really go out and drink on the weekend. I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
Like, that's the explanation. If that makes you feel not so sour about it, and you're like, I'm sacrificing. I want to go drink, and it's like. If that makes you, that's great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, it makes people take their recovery more seriously, you know, whereas people are like, oh yeah, I'm not a powerlifter. I'm a powerlifter. I'm a hardcore guy. I do binge drink on the weekend.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you'd be a little bit better at it if you didn't.
Yeah.
So it's like, maybe you should think of yourself as an athlete. If you want to, that's fine.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to maximize your result, I think there is something to be said for thinking of yourself as an athlete.
Yeah.
And thinking of it as a sport. Even whether you think it is or it isn't, I don't really give a fuck at all. But like you said, like we said, you doing a different sport that really thrusted in your face that quality of practice is just as important as quantity of practice.
Yeah.
You extrapolate that, you're like, well, the other thing I do is basically the same thing, and it changed how you think about it.
Yeah.
So it's like if we do think about it as a sport, there's a lot we can learn about how people prepare for sports. You know, you deload, you've got a roughly periodized approach to your 10-week lead up to a fight. It's kind of similar, but you do lifting things instead of fighting things. It's like there's so much we can learn if we group it with other sports. Like,
Yeah.
we have to know it's not the same thing. And like I think being scared of like in the off season doing things that will make you like slightly more athletic is probably a decent idea. People are like, yeah, I don't split squat, my balance is bad. It's like, I think you should.
I think that's something that like I was like, my goal was to get stronger. Like that's the goal, is to get stronger. Like that's part of the era that we came from.
Yeah. Well, it was like the guy. It was just assumed that the guy that won was the strongest guy.
Yeah.
Which, looking back, maybe we should have pieced that together. Of there were guys that were probably roundabouts as strong as Andre.
Yeah.
Andre was better at squatting.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like. Maybe we should, but it was like it was just perceived like Andre's stronger. His legs are stronger.
Yeah,
It's like, that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
He's the better squatter, and his training was much more specific, which is why his bench press was terrible. I love Andre. Absolutely, I've got his autograph in my office.
Yeah.
One of the worst benches ever. I don't know why he did that.
Just arm pain, baby.
So, but Jesus Christ, he didn't even try to get his back tight. It was crazy. But yeah, so it's like we probably should have pieced that together. But the understanding back then was that powerlifting is a strength contest.
Yeah.
The winner is the strong guy.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, we probably could have noticed that Kirill's bench looked better than most people's, and that's why he's strong and good.
Yeah.
But that was our understanding back then.
Yeah.
You know.
And I think part of that is like it's like I'm not gonna do something that's not like making me stronger. Like, well, there's no point doing that because that's not my goal. And then like the idea that like something's gonna pay dividends down the road, like something that I am forever grateful.
Well, it's the same thing with the volume not paying off.
Yeah.
The idea of delayed gratification. If you can't sense it the next week in training, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's like eventually this whole thing zooms out a little bit, and we need to be able to appraise whether something pays off a little longer term.
Yeah. Like I, for some reason, when I was like 14, I watched a Pete Rubish mobility video, and for some reason, 14-year-old me was like, I'm gonna do that every single day. It is one of the greatest boons that I've ever had at lifting. It's just always being like had an excess of hip mobility.
Yeah.
Like as I've gotten bigger and stronger, like during points of fatigue, just always having that has been the best thing in the world.
We're gonna get you an upper body one of those.
Nah, don't need it. All right, guys, that's been this episode of Large Lads. Thank you for tuning in. That's all. Love you.
What an abrupt cutoff.